Hey y'all. Hi. So, guess what? I feel like this is going to be one of those videos. Like a bit noisy, but bear with me. I'm living in a house with 3 other adults, a baby, a dog, and a cat. For today's video, I have filmed myself trying Pat McGrath eyeshadows on my eyes for the first time in my life. I have never had my hands on a Pat McGrath palette before, and I feel really, really lucky that this one came up on my Octoly page. So Octoly is a website where brands will put products that they're trying to get into the hands of influencers. And if you have an account, if you're an influencer, you can go on there and request it. So I saw it and I was like, listen, Pat McGrath team, I would love to get the chance to try these because you guys are always telling me. I actually feel like maybe Pat McGrath eyeshadow, that's the makeup product that I get the most DMs and emails and messages about from people saying like, you really, really, really have to try this. You're really, really gonna love it. So I have always wanted to try some Pat McGrath eyeshadow. You guys seem to have always wanted me to try Pat McGrath eyeshadow, and in this video, I do it, I try it, I do it for the first time on camera, and you can see me putting on the look and you can see me kind of reacting in real time to the experience. If this is your first time to my channel, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. I'm Hannah. I love beautiful things. I love beauty products. I enjoy reviewing beauty products, but I try not to normalize overspending on my channel because I think that it's important, especially for people who love beautiful things, to also practice moderation. And if that sounds good to you, I would love it if you just go ahead and subscribe to my channel. Now let's go ahead and get into the meat of this video. So before we transition to the part of the video where I'm like putting the eyeshadow on, like as you can tell, I already have the look on and I filmed myself applying the look, but now I'm going back and like filming the intro. You know, it's like the movie magic is happening. I'm going to show you the swatches because I did take some B-roll footage when I had the camera in the overhead filming position. I took some really close-up footage of this. So I will roll that right now and I'll talk you through the shades. So this is the Pat McGrath Mothership, the Little Mothership. It's the like Little Divine Rose palette, and it only has 6 eyeshadows, and the packaging is cardboard. It's not like one of those big chunky Mothership, like the black lacquered Mothership palettes, but it does feel extremely high end. Like it is probably the most expensive feeling cardboard packaging I've ever had my hands on. And it does have this shiny black lacquered background inside of the palette, which I feel like is kind of a nod to the black lacquer of the full-size Mothership palettes. So definitely I approve of this. I really like, you know, beautiful, fancy feeling, luxurious feeling things. And I feel like this is that, even though it's like this half-size version of a Pat McGrath palette. So inside we have the 6 shades, and it also came with this very high-end feeling overlay that has the names of the shades. Pink Champagne, which is, you know, just like a pale shimmery shade that doesn't have too much texture, which means that it's actually great for like blending stuff out and softening the other colors. It doesn't have too much texture or glimmer. It's a metallic, but it's like one of those shades that's almost like a cross between a satin and a metallic. Then we have Peach Dusk, which is a really pretty mid-toned matte. Fuchsia Flame, which I thought was just kind of like a almost like cherry colored or cherry magenta colored metallic, but then when I swatched it, I saw that it's a pretty intense fuchsia to orange duochrome. Hedonistic Rose, which is the deepest matte, but it's not that deep, as you'll see when you see me trying it on. And it swatched very poorly. Like the swatch doesn't look good. You'll see that in the pictures, but it applied beautifully. It feels pretty creamy. It feels quite pigmented. And then it just doesn't have that like smeary silicone-y stuff in it that makes a matte shadow swatch really gooey and juicy. It doesn't have that, but I feel like it does have whatever it needs to perform really well on the eyes, because I had no problem applying it and blending it out, and it really held its own in this look. In the middle of the bottom row, we have Scandalous, which is just like a shimmery, sort of like rusty copper, kind of mid-toned as well. And then Golden Honey is kind of the outlier to me because it's from a different family. It's just a gold. It's like a really, really bright crumbly, and I mean that in a good way, like it's got that crumbly flaky texture, bright gold metallic. I'm glad it's in this palette because I feel like it gives the palette some diversity in terms of the kinds of looks that you can create with it. If that shade weren't in here, it would just be all pink all the time, no matter what you did. Because that gold is in there, I feel like there's the chance to get a less pink look and, you know, like a more gold look, one that moves towards more of like a neutral kind of territory. I haven't played with that. I didn't use the gold one in my look today, but I'm looking forward to doing that. I guess what I'm getting at is that my first impression of this upon seeing it and swatching it, and this is an impression that was confirmed by my use of it when I put it on my eyes, which I'll get to in just a minute. My impression of it is that it is a beautifully monochromatic feeling palette. It really does have like a single intense color aesthetic that isn't too dynamic. It doesn't ping pong all over the place. It's like one smooth idea that's being delivered. But it doesn't feel like a one-trick pony. It feels kind of like a two-trick pony because of that gold there. And it's actually, when I say two-trick pony, I don't mean you can only get two looks out of it, but I mean that it's almost like it has two moods, like there are like two different moods, and then in each of those moods you could get a variety of looks. And the last thing that I want to say before we transition into the part where I'm putting the makeup on is that I like the size of the pans. I like that they're these kind of big, soft pans of makeup. I've been working with a lot of makeup, you know, testing eyeshadows lately that are just like in much, much smaller pans, like the Urban Decay ones, the Alter Ego ones. And when I opened this and started using it, it wasn't just the texture of the shadows and the packaging that made it feel luxurious, but there was kind of this like breadth, this sort of spaciousness about it that really appealed to me for some reason when I first opened it. And I thought that that was worth mentioning because it was just one little extra thing that made it feel special and that made me excited to put it on my eyes. All right, let's go ahead and jump into the makeup application first impressions. Y'all, sometimes Julia and Hannah have too much fun. This morning, Julia was like, I feel great. We should have lavender Collinses every night. And I'm over here with my electrolyte water like, okay, what are we even doing? I am applying this eyeshadow palette that I haven't put on my eyes yet. I usually am not the kind of YouTuber who manages to refrain from like testing stuff out like long enough to actually test it out on camera for the first time. But that's what I'm gonna do with this today. It's just gonna be like you and me getting ready and me trying Pat McGrath eyeshadow for the very first time. I did swatch it, so I did sort of see what the colors look like, and there was a surprise, which is that Fuchsia Flame, which just looks like a regular shiny like metallic pink in the pan, is actually a duochrome. So that's the one that I'm going to spotlight because it's definitely the most dramatic and exciting eyeshadow in this palette. I'm going to go ahead and put some eyeshadow primer onto my eyelids. I'm still using this one from Alter Ego. It's so good. Let's talk about the strategy first and then I'll zoom you in. I think that what I'm gonna do is just do exactly what I would do if I had just opened this palette and it was makeup playtime. So I'm really gonna like let you guys in on what would be the event of my first instincts, my first experience with this. And that instinct is to just take that interesting shade. I'm not actually sure if this is one of the shades that is like a special shade. You know, Pat McGrath has these special shades. I don't know if this just like being a duochrome merits that label because I haven't had enough experience with her eyeshadows to know. So maybe you guys can let me know. But what I do know is that in this palette, this is the specialist shade. So I feel like it's really going to tell the tale, at least for me, because I really love special and textured and unusual eyeshadows. So I'm going to take that duochrome shadow, I'm going to put it all over my lids, and then I'm probably going to go in with the two mattes. One is sort of like a more pale rose color and one's like a richer burgundy, and use them to kind of blend and build some dimension. I might use the pale rose color, the sort of light pink, as a brow bone shade, and then we'll call it a day, and that'll be the look, and that's the video, and I'm going to go ahead and zoom you in and start. Oh yeah, hopefully you can see pretty well. So yeah, let's do it. I'm just gonna start with this shade in the upper right-hand corner. It is called Fuchsia Flame. So that's a lot of pigment. A lot of times when I'm doing this, for example, I just did a look like this with the Urban Decay Stoned Vibes palette, and I started with the jade, the green, which is called jade. And in order to get that amount of coverage, I had to dip back into the pan like at least 3 times. And with this, it's just one fingerful that's putting down the entire first layer over the whole area, which I actually feel like for these sunsetty, like pink to gold or pink to orange shifting shades is pretty unusual. They tend to be sheer in my experience, and they tend to really need some work to build up. So, all right, already feeling kind of impressed. It's interesting how pigment really makes a look less effortful. You know what I mean? I feel like I got a really even layer and I got a nice shape without having to try very hard. All right, I'm gonna take this little brush. It's the Refer P07C, and I'm actually going to go ahead and just see how well I can get it to blend out if I keep using that eyeshadow. So continuing on as if it was going to be a one shadow look. I know it's not going to be, but I'm just kind of curious how it'll behave. So I'm instantly realizing that I have to take the care that I take when I'm using really, really good eyeshadows that are really pigmented, because they do exactly what you want them to. And that means that you can't really be sloppy. You can't really be vague about what you want. I feel like the Urban Decay continues to be a good example with those. I was going in at this stage and I was kind of like, blah, 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 and they only kind of do half of what you want. And so you can kind of blather them around and then like eventually urge them into the spot that you want. But with these, because they're so pigmented, they're going to do exactly what I want. So if I was like, blah, 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 then it would be blah, 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 all over my lid. So I'm just making sure that I only I only trace the brush into the shape that I really want to see on my eye. And, not going too far outside the lines except to blend a little bit. So it just feels like easier and more precise artistic work. So I'm making this kind of arc above my crease. Oh my gosh, it's so fun. This is so fun. It's such a pleasure. And I'm actually going to go ahead and go into Pink Champagne, which is this paler pink shade, with the same brush and go above, just blend the edge and go all the way up to my brows. I'm actually going to take some more of Pink Champagne onto a clean pencil brush, the Refer 03, and blend into the inner corner. I'm going to start in the inner corner with that just to give the inner corner some softness. I just feel like I have so much control over what ends up happening on my eyes. Awesome. So I'm going to go in with the darkest shade, which is this burgundy called Hedonistic Rose. I'm going to place that on the outer corner and on the lower lash line. Okay, so here's where I think that this palette is maybe going to let me down, not in terms of quality, but in terms of the edit of the shades, because this is not very much darker in terms of like contrast, like tone, than the lid shade, than that shiny pink. And so I'm only going to be able to get so much depth in the look. It's going to end up looking, I think, pretty like monochromatic and also monotonatic. Kind of like what I was talking about with the Urban Decay palette. There isn't a dark enough shade to get anything remotely smoky. The pigment is unreal. And it's like very accurate. It's like you get exactly what you go for. When you dip into a pan with a little bit of brush, if you dip in a lot and you get a lot on, or a little and you get a little on, I'm so used to having there be a difference between what I expect from the pan and what I actually see on my eye, that it's kind of shocking to have it just be exactly what I I kind of expected. Okay, you've all been right this whole time. So I'm going back and just packing as dense of a layer of this darker burgundy matte as I possibly can in the outer corner, just to try to get as much dimension as I can, as much smoke as I can, because I just want to show basically what the palette's capable of in that realm. And it is building up a little bit. It's just, I'm still ending up with a very soft look, a very romantic kind of blend. And then into the waterline, I've actually been enjoying this quite a lot lately. It's the Milani Stay Put eyeliner in the shade Picante, and I'm gonna put it in my waterline for this look. It's pretty red, and so I feel like it won't do anything too intensely structural to this look. It'll like let the look continue to be itself. And that's what I want, because this is my first time working with this palette. I want to just like have the look be purely evocative of what the palette does. So yeah, that gave me like a nice rich velvety red waterline, but the look is still all in the same tones. You know, it hasn't added like a black or a brown or anything. But I am going to ground the look with black by adding mascara. And I'm going to use the Pat McGrath Dark Star mascara. Okay, so that's a great deal of pretty intense mascara, which is what I love to put on my lashes. And I also feel like it worked really well with this look, because the look had some dimension, but it was also pretty romantic and diffused in terms of application. So it's nice to have something like slightly more structural and bold on the lashes rather than like a wispy looking lash. I'm gonna go ahead and zoom out and just go through the rest of my face. I'm not gonna be talking through all of it, but maybe I'll just kind of mention what I'm using, or if I don't mention what I'm using, I'll put it all in the description box below, everything else that I choose to put on my face. Okay, there's the completed look, and I didn't end up talking through the rest of my face, so I will definitely link everything down below. If there's something that I put on that you're curious about, you can find the link to it in the description box. Let's talk about my experience with the palette. If you can't already tell, it was just seamless, effortless. I feel like for a look this high impact, and frankly that uses this many shadows, I mean, I think you can make a high impact look just by using a bright shadow and blending it out all over your lid, or a duochrome. You know, if you use a statement shadow, it doesn't need to be a complex look to be high impact. But I used 1, 2, 3, 4. So I used 4 out of the 6 shades in this palette. Numbers. I used 4 shadows. I didn't use this more sort of red copper shimmer, and I also didn't use the gold shimmer. I really kept it to the pinks. But you know, I was going back and forth. I was placing some in some areas and some in others. There was a lot of delicate blending, and it all just went seamlessly and also very quickly because the blending was so easy. The shadows did that thing where it felt like they were blending themselves, but they didn't blend themselves into oblivion. I think sometimes when shadows blend too easily or blend into each other too easily, they can become muddy. So that's the delicate balance that we're looking for, right? We want it to feel like it's super easy to blend a shadow, but we also want to feel like that shadow has enough pigment so that it holds its own and actually blends into the either out into your skin or into the other shadow that you're blending it with, and makes a gradient rather than just like a third color. Unfortunately, when things go this well, it makes for the least interesting review. You know, all I can say is that, and also this isn't a full-on review, obviously it's just like a fun getting ready together, a first impressions that's shared, kind of like a shared makeup playtime. But with any kind of makeup video with like a get ready with me or a review, when there's the demonstration of the product, when it goes this well, it makes for kind of like a one-dimensional review. All I can say now as my first impression is that everything went as well as it could possibly have gone, like absolutely top quality, which is what you guys have been telling me all this time Pat McGrath is. So, you know, it's not that I didn't believe you, it's just that I didn't have occasion to acquire any Pat McGrath makeup until now. I'm really excited that I'm getting to test it, and I'm really excited that, at least so far with this palette, for me, it has lived up to its reputation. I do have to confess that as I was applying the eyeshadow, I had a very powerful impulse to buy another Pat McGrath palette, like to buy the one that I've always wanted. The one that has the color story that really speaks to me is the Midnight Sun palette. And I have had that palette on my wish list, like the public wish list, not public, but the wish list that I share with my family, like my family wish list that everyone has access to. It's been on there for the holidays ever since it released. It's like always on there whenever I have a birthday or a holiday or anything. And it's just, you know, there's a lot of stuff on there and nobody's ever opted to choose it as a gift for me. So it's not as though I've never had like my hat in the ring for acquiring that palette. It's just that I have never gotten close to being in a place to like want to spend $125 of my budget on that palette. And I don't think that I will go on to do that, not because these eyeshadows didn't impress me, but simply because I have so much eyeshadow. Like I've talked about this, you know, all year long. It's just not at the top of my list of stuff that I want to spend my budget on, especially not such an expensive palette. But I do feel like I have a renewed interest in the releases from Pat McGrath, the eyeshadow releases that have called to me the most in the past, now that I know how much I actually really do like the formula. I am very pleased with this look too, and I usually don't do pinks like this. It's just because everything blended so seamlessly, it feels more effortless. It feels like the look even is coming across more effortless, whereas I tend to really go in and like pack stuff and blend stuff and glitter and layer. And I think that that's why I tend to think of this kind of a color direction as going to be something that ends me up with a really editorial or high impact look, because that's just like my want. But in this case, I think that the blendability, the formula, probably also the palette, like the offerings of the palette, the fact that there's not a really deep dark shade, so it all ended up staying a little bit lighter than I would have made it if I had just been reaching for all of my eyeshadows or like moving among palettes. All of that together ended me up with a look that has a high impact color in it, but that I feel is very wearable. I am really curious though about Pat McGrath palettes that do have deeper shades in them, that are just like grungier, deeper, richer. I mean, this is definitely like that one light golden pink peachy sunset situation. Like every look I think I'll probably be able to get, you know, several different looks from this, and you can get a very gold look and a very kind of coppery look. I could get several looks from this palette that aren't pink at all, right? So there's definitely a breadth of options in this palette, but I am really curious now about how I would fare if I had a Pat McGrath palette with like a really deep brown in it, or a black, or some of those like rich grungy purples and greens. I cannot stop looking at the eye look. Like this is me right now. I'm like, hey girl, hey. So yeah, sorry this isn't like the deepest and most revolutionary first impressions or get ready with me. The moral of the story is basically I tried Pat McGrath eyeshadows for the first time and they're awesome. But it was fun to do it with you. It was fun to do it on camera. And let me know what you think. Like, have you tried these eyeshadows? Have you tried this particular palette? If you're a Pat McGrath aficionado out there, if you like have all of her palettes, or if you have some of the mothership palettes and also some of the smaller ones, how does this one stack up to them? Like, am I getting the full experience with this, or am I just getting like one version of the experience? Give me your wisdom. Why do I always look like I was crying after I drink water? Like I drink water and then like my eyes are all red and my skin's all red. And I always worry that you guys think that I was off camera crying, but I was really just off camera drinking water. I think that that's it. I think that I did what I set out to do, and that this is the end of the video. I appreciate you so much for being here. And I trust that you are remembering to take extra good care of yourself right now so that you can be the most effective version of yourself as you do your work in the world.